Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
We're so excited to have you. And it's not technically your first time at Creative Mornings Portland. I know we had you on virtually for a little snippet back in 2020, early virtual days.
Yeah, yeah, it's hilariously enough, I'm a complete night owl. So I usually go to bed at like 3 or 4 in the morning. So I woke up at 7:30 and drank already a whole pot of coffee. So, but I'm really excited. Actually, I was like, there's sun's coming through a different window that I'm used to. So I'm like, oh, this is what it looks like in the morning.
Well, yep, this is what it looks like in the morning.
Yeah.
You learn whole new things when you wake up before, I don't know, 9 or 10 a.m. Whole new
Yeah.
world.
That's a whole new world.
Uh, I'm glad you made the exception for us. I mean, because it's Portland, I also have to ask, like, do you have a coffee of choice? Who's your roaster?
Oh, oh gosh, I'm really not that picky. I will drink pretty much any kind of coffee as long as it's just not like, Folgers. But I do really like coffee from Never. Do you know
Hmm.
where that is?
Yeah, in
Coffee.
Belmont,
Yep. Yeah, I really like coffee from there. So,
they have such
um,
cute branding. So
I know.
bright.
Also, that's always helps us creatives when it looks really cute too.
I'm like, it must taste better because it
Yeah.
looks more colorful, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. Well, Fran, one of the things that really amazes me about your journey and some of the like events you've produced that I've been to, and just seeing your creative career really blossom the last couple of years is you've had so many different jobs. And I would love it if we could start by kind of asking you to tell us more about the different careers you've explored and how you ended up from there to here. And I have the list. If you'd like, I can pull it up now that you shared with me.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great.
Fran's list.
I just did this one day out of um, just trying to jog my memory and just really kind of trying to see if there's any connecting dots. Kind of trying to figure out like, oh, like did that experience help me inform a part of what I'm doing now? And it's kind of all over the place, which is kind of funny, but there's definitely some very specific, like it's very customer service sort of driven, like food service industry. But yeah, the when I was saying earlier that I worked at Disney World as a character, that was I probably got that job when I was 16 or 17. I think I was 16 years old. I was living in Orlando, Florida at the time, and I went and auditioned for a job and didn't know what they were gonna, put where they were gonna put me. And yeah, they hired me as a character. So the funny thing about Disney World characters is that they're all by height, which kind of makes sense. So there is the Donald Duck height group, Mickey Mouse, Chip, the Chipmunks, Pluto, Goofy. And so then there's all these other characters that fit underneath those categories. And so I fit under the Pluto category. And my favorite was Eeyore because I didn't really have to emote that much. I could just be a solemn little sad guy in that
Oh, I
costume.
love that.
Yeah, so that one was pretty good because you could be low energy if you wanted to, but yeah, you had to kind of like everyone kind of came up with their own custom sort of signature for each of the characters that they would do for when they would go do autographs and stuff out in the park. And so some people were really great at drawing, and so they would always add these little flares to their signature and stuff. So it was really cool to see everyone's translation of what that would look like. And um, I think maybe when I turned 17, they were considering me to play a face character, which was Pocahontas. And even at that age, I kind of knew like, I don't think I'm gonna do that. Thank you so much, but I'm gonna pass on that. So, but
Even
yeah, and then
17-year-old Fran was wise.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think that's appropriate, so I'm not going to do that. But I did. I was able to learn how to be a puppeteer on one of the floats for the nighttime parade that I worked at, and then also ended up learning how to drive floats as well. So my
Did
experience at Disney
those
World was pretty funny.
did those experiences kind of did they like ask for volunteers and you're like, sure, I'd love to learn to drive a float, or was it kind of assigned to you?
You can basically every I guess maybe it's like every parade season they would put out like, oh, we need float drivers or we need puppeteers. There was jobs that they needed to fill, and you could kind of just sign your name up and either take the class or take the training or audition for it. And the float driver job was really cool. I just had never done anything like that, and so driving kind of big vehicles and stuff to me is like kind of no big deal. So it's nice to be able to feel comfortable and confident doing something like that. And the puppet job was really funny. I was Sebastian, the crab
The
from
crab?
the crab and Under the Sea song. The words are pretty fast, so I was having to. So the way that you make the mouth move is like a bicycle brake. So that was like Under the Sea, just it for like 45 minutes during the whole parade. So I think that's probably why I have arthritis in this right hand. That was probably because of that job. But yeah, I feel like I really thrived sort of in those sort of kind of hidden spaces, like being a float driver and being a puppeteer. I really liked kind of being hidden, but still being able to be a huge part of it, but not being seen. I kind of really like that a lot. Even with the character job, pretty much the same thing too.
Well, that's a really cool experience for a teenage job. More exciting than, the opportunities where I lived in rural Idaho. And I was like, oh, sort through potatoes. Yes, I will do that for
Yeah.
$4 an hour.
Oh no.
Um, what, so what took you from kind of that little bit of like engineering and production space or performance space into food service?
Oh gosh. Well, so when I was going to high school in Orlando, I actually was in a technical theater magnet program, and so I ended up learning how to do lights and sound and costume and props and set design. And that's the doggy. Sorry, y'all.
Hi, hi,
Um,
pup.
the male person comes around within the next 3 hours, so this might be happening a little bit. Um, but so I learned how to do all those different jobs in the technical theater space, and I really was like, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And luckily, because I did live in Orlando, Florida, I was able to walk across the street to Universal Studios, and it's literally across the street. I could hear the roller coasters and stuff going when we were in school, which was pretty funny. But walked across the street. I was 17 years old, and I went and got a job running lights and sound for the horror makeup show at Universal Studios. And so had a big ring of keys. I had my own walkie-talkie, and yeah, basically worked at this really cool show and had to even take like a weapons training class because there was a revolver that shot blanks in the show. So a lot of responsibility for a 17-year-old. And we're talking about sort of the topic of being, of being invisible. I don't know if a lot of the other folks that were working at that show were excited that a 17-year-old teenager that just graduated high school came and was able to get this job. But granted, I had just graduated from that program, and when I had to take the electrical test, I aced it because I just graduated. So all that information was just really fresh in my mind. So I was able to get this job that maybe they had been working at Universal as like a stagehand for a couple of years, and were trying to work up to that point. And to be honest, I think at 17, I really had no idea like who I was or my sense of self, and not even really sure if I even knew what self-esteem was. I kind of just feel like, you're just like this baby deer kind of walking around. Um, and yeah, it was really hard. I don't think a lot of people were very warm to me, and it was really hard to feel accepted in that space. Um, and I tried really hard, but unfortunately, it was a hard experience for me, and I just didn't know like, oh, like, do people just not like me? Like, am I too shy? am I not funny enough? You're second guessing yourself the whole time, just because you're not able to kind of get in. And in the end, I ended up quitting that job after I think 6 or 8 months, and never doing technical theater stuff ever again. So that was
Wow.
a heartbreaker. But that experience ending that there ended up. It was right when I was 17, turning 18, and at that time I was really involved with going to punk shows at that age. And there is an organization called Food Not Bombs, which just takes like leftover food that can't be sold to the public, and then we kind of cook it and make vegan food for houseless folks or just anybody that is hungry. And that experience, doing Food Not Bombs and trying to figure out how to make food from different donations and being creative and thinking about what can we make, was then led me to going to culinary school, because I was like,
Wow.
oh, I should learn how to make all this food. So that, it's such a funny, severe kind of change in direction, but that was really what it was. I kind of was just like, oh, because I don't know if anybody else in this space has experience going to a Food Not Bombs, or going or trying kind of like a collective soup in this way, where you just, it kind of all tastes the same. It's like this very generic vegetable soup that tastes the same no matter where you eat it in the whole, like, at anywhere.
Fran,
And
you're
so I was like,
talking
I
about
really
my
want to make.
kitchen. This is my kitchen. It's like just open the fridge and
Yeah,
whatever's there, it's all going to turn into the same thing.
yeah, same thing. Yeah. So I just really was like, everybody deserves to have a great flavorful meal. So I decided to go to culinary school. So yeah, it was just like like one thing didn't work out, and I just turned the corner and just went somewhere else.
Oh, that's rad. I love that you just had the confidence. You're like, I can do this in this space too. I can be good at other things. I don't know that
Yeah.
everyone
I
kind of has
mean,
that self-awareness at 17, 18.
yeah. I mean, it is hilarious what you figure out when you're dealing with like 10 cases of like rotting bananas and a giant garbage bag full of bagels. You're like, what can I make? You're like, okay, I'll figure this out. So yeah, always having to like make the best of every situation, even if you don't have all the pieces. And I think that experience and doing that over and over and over again actually really informed connecting it to work now, like being a really good producer, because
Mhm.
like, or an event producer, it's like sometimes things don't work out, and you just have to kind of make it work. So I think that really helped uh, uh, evolve my skill to being able to just like switch back and forth and just be really flexible and make things work.
That sounds like it. So from there, you went through culinary school and then you did start working in food spaces. I'd love to hear more
Yeah.
about what those environments were like.
Yeah. So this was like the late 90s, early 2000s. And actually, what's really funny is when I was working at Universal, we had a trailer, and in the trailer was one TV that was mounted in the corner. And it was right when the Food Network had first started. And the programming on the Food Network when that first started was god awful. It was terrible. They only had like two or three or four maybe hosts doing different shows. And so when I started going to culinary school and started working in kitchens, it was right when the Food Network was getting bigger and like food culture was like becoming really cool, and celebrity chefs and all this kind of thing. And one of my jobs that I got out of culinary school was working for Emerald Lagasse. He'd opened up a restaurant at Universal Studios. Again, I like found my way back there again. And it was really interesting. And I didn't know this at the time, but being a woman and a woman of color um, in a kitchen space, especially a professional kitchen space, I just always thought that people would see me for my skill set and see me for, you know, um, the ideas and the creativity that I could bring to the table. And I thought if I just worked really, really hard, that would be enough. But being a woman in the kitchen is already hard. Being a woman of color in the kitchen is probably doubly hard, but I just didn't even think about that. But there was, I applied for the job. of course, when you're first starting out, everyone wants to work on the line, on the grill, because you just want to be able to be on the, where the fire is in the action. And I don't know if it's because I'm a woman, but they're like, okay, you're gonna work like the salad station, or you're gonna work the dessert station, and you're like, okay, well, there's not really any fire involved in either of those spaces, but okay. And so I ended up getting put in pastry, and the kitchen was like an open kitchen, so we were doing 400 covers a night, so 400 people coming through the restaurant, and it was an open kitchen, so the whole entire restaurant can see everyone cooking, which was really intense, and we all had to wear like those tall white paper hats, the whole thing. It was like very like fine dining, like whatever. And you would see, the way that it works in the kitchen is, 400 people order their salads, right? So then the salad station, and it goes around the kitchen. And so I would get hit last as pastry. But when I was done doing kind of my turn, I would run over to the fry station, because almost every garnish came out of the fry station. There's 14 fryers. And I would run over there and help that guy out, and was really trying to show the chefs that, hey, look, like I can work at a different station, not just the pastry station. But unfortunately, and I don't know if anybody here has worked in service industry or worked in kind of these restaurant spaces, if you're not kind of willing to party with them or have relations with them, you kind of aren't really accepted. And my way getting around either of those things was to go with them after work to like the sports bar and go eat like dozen raw oysters, even though I kind of hated raw oysters then, but I love them now. And drink beer and like watch sports and try to basically be like one of the guys. I just tried to assimilate and just tried to be like them so I could fit in. And as I kept doing that, I found it harder and harder to be in that space. Um, so it was interesting to just try so hard and just always be invisible in that kitchen. And I hope that things are better now. I definitely see there's way more women that own restaurants and are running kitchens and stuff. And so I think that there's been so much headway in that. And I kind of wish now, like I wish that I could have been that age now so I could experience what it would be like working in a kitchen run by a woman, or own a restaurant myself, these days. But yeah, that was a tough place to be in for sure.
Well, I'm sure everyone can kind of relate to a place that they've been, work or otherwise, where they do feel that pressure to like fit in and assimilate, like you said, to be successful there rather than really being true to themselves. And that's really hard. But,
Yeah.
you know, you never know, Fran. There may still be like a restaurant run by you in the future. Don't, cut out any options here. Um, but it's really cool that you were able to kind of learn from that. And even in hindsight, it's easier to kind of see how those things connect and led you to one thing or another. And you seem really confident and like you trust your own voice now rather than kind of like being reactive to others or just going off of what others tell you to do. But have there been times when feedback from others has really played into your decisions, whether positive or negative?
Yeah, I think, there's a thing about being a creative person sometimes, and where, you know, there's a lot of times where I'm like, second guessing myself, like, is the work done? Like, I imagine, like, I always think about painters, like, how do you know when the painting's done? Kind of a thing. And I feel like my, um, my experience of, putting on punk shows when I was younger and doing food not bombs and just always trying to bring community together, especially like Orlando is like this wasteland of like perfect manicured lawns and palm trees and theme parks. But Orlando itself, as far as culture goes, was really hard to find. So I would say, like, I would see someone across the street that was wearing a shirt of a band that I liked, and I would like run over there, like, oh my God, you're gonna be my friend because I don't know, I couldn't find any, couldn't find any of those folks. Um, and so, just putting on when I found those people in my community, I really just wanted to bring people together. So, that experience, translated now into, being a really great event producer, right? Because I'm like, I love creating memories and love creating experiences for people. And last, what was it, 2018, I ended up renting a houseboat at Lake Billy Chinook, which I highly recommend if you're in a little pod. Maybe this summer, if you guys are in a pod, like it's such a great little trip. Um, but I had like brought DJ equipment, I brought records, like party lights, like all this stuff, and my friends and I were just having a great time. And one of them came over to me and said, you're just so great at creating these memories and experiences for us. Like you're such an amazing producer. And I was like, what is that? And they were like, what do you mean? And I go, what is that? What do you mean a producer? And they were like, oh, like what you have been doing like your whole life, putting on shows and organizing events and doing all this thing, bringing community together. And I was like, that's a job? And they're like, yeah, that's a job. So like I didn't even know that you could get paid to do that, to like organize experiences for people. Because I think also, kind of growing up and being a community organizer and activist, you also don't really, you don't really get paid for that work. And so I always thought bringing people together, creating experiences was like this like selfless thing that you did, and you just couldn't, there's no possible way you could get paid to do that job. So even translating that into, doing Joop Joop, and in the very beginning, not really knowing like how much people get paid to be an event producer, and not really knowing how much to say, to charge, and probably undercutting myself for a long time because I had not ever paid myself to do that job ever my whole entire life. And so really like big learning curves in all spaces of trying to figure out how much to get paid too.
I mean, amen to that. That sounds like one of the places, and you and I had talked about this a little bit earlier. That sounds like one of the places where if you had had access to more mentors or peers who are willing to share that kind of information, that's what kind of lifts everyone up. If we can have honest conversations about like, what should we charge? What do you charge? Like, can you give me advice on this? It doesn't it doesn't hurt anyone to give that advice, and it really lifts up, especially in creative work. It lifts everyone up.
Totally. I mean, I think I'm really, really blessed to have now a community of creatives where, if I'm going to be doing a commercial photo shoot and I'm not sure how much to pay the lighting person, I will hit up all my other, producer friends and say like, how much do you pay? How much does that person get paid? And we all, actually, in 2020, we actually started like a little spreadsheet and started putting the rates of different jobs in there so that all of us could know, like, yeah, this is how much this person deserves to get paid. And so we're not
That's
undercutting each
amazing.
other. So we are practicing actively, especially with um, other producers that I work really closely with, like on, we co-produce photo shoots together. We are very, very, very transparent about sharing rates and just sharing all of that kind of information, because we're all trying to really like set that standards that we all are like getting what we're owed or what we're due. But yeah, it's kind of shocking because I actually didn't know how little I was paying myself before for so long. I had no idea. So now I know. So it's good to be able to have that understanding and say like, this is industry standard, and I'm not gonna take less for that work, you know. But I think also when you first start a business, you kind of, want to, maybe I'll just throw them a bone this time, and the next time they'll hire me again, But all that negotiation stuff is all challenging. But I think being able to be really transparent with your peers, and getting that information, is really, really super helpful.
It is. Yeah, and I hope we see more of that, especially in like communities like this. If you need to know, like, reach out and share. This is a good place to ask or find someone to
Yeah.
ask. I'd love to move into talking about Joop Joop. Before we do that, you sent me one of the um, I don't know. I feel like it was one of the first big commercials that you did with Joop Joop, your creative studio. Was it?
Yeah, so actually, it was a commercial. It was the first commercial that I ever helped to produce, and it's for a local woman of color owned boxing gear company called Society 9. And this was January of 20, so 2020. Gosh, time is so weird now. I like can't remember like what year anything happened, but yeah, it must have been 2020. So this was, yeah, just a couple months before quarantine happened. And that thing where you're like, oh my god, like you've just been open for a year and now I'm working on a commercial, and then everything kind of shut down 2 months later. So that momentum that I had was there, but this commercial, it makes me cry almost every time I see it. But yeah, I would love to for you to share it. Yeah, that's really great. The director was Alberta Poon, and I produced it with Annie Tiang Thompson and Eva Moss. So it was our crew was almost all women, and a huge part of that crew was also BIPOC and queer. So we tried really, really, really hard to hire people, that reflect our identities um, and yeah, I mean, I think for us, it just felt like, we're so a lot of times just, at least with my experience, trying to get a job in different creative spaces and not really having, the proper looking resume or the right education to be able to be a part of those creative spaces. It was really important to make this commercial with yeah, with the people in our community and be like, look, like we can totally do this too. I didn't go to film school, like, and we can make really beautiful, powerful work on really, really small budgets. And imagine if you gave us the money that we could actually, the amount of money that we would actually need to make something, or the support or the mentorship or whatever. um, I think the BIPOC multidisciplinary creatives in this town are definitely a force to be reckoned with, and I really hope that we're able to kind of get more experiences. But yeah, making that commercial was so cool and so special, and I hope that we'll be able to make some again when it's safe to do so.
And it's safe to do so. Is that kind of the driving force behind why you made your creative agency yourself instead of like joining a studio and doing work under someone else's umbrella?
Well, before this, I co-owned a screen printing shop with my husband called Seizure Palace, and that's still open. And being a small business owner is really hard, like really, really, really hard. And but it was really my husband's dream. Like he went to art school, and so owning a screen printing shop was really his thing. And I was really running sort of the business side of things, and just kind of got to a place where I was like, God, like I really want to explore being a creative person. I didn't go to film school like a lot of my friends did, or go to design school. And so even though going to culinary school was creative, but I feel like most people really view it as like a trade, a trade. Um, but I ended up just like being like, I really want to explore a creative job, and started, trying to apply for jobs at creative agencies or ad agencies, and just was having like zero luck, even trying to get a job as like the front desk person, because my resume looked, I owned a screen printing shop for 12 years. And then that wild list that you showed everybody, they're like, okay, cool. I don't know if puppeteer experience really works here. So I feel like my resume just looked real odd, and people are just like, okay, well, your job, like, mostly working in service industry spaces, like, why are you wanting to come over here, kind of a thing, and not having a degree to like prove why or even get a job. So it was hard, and I was kind of just like, this doesn't make any sense, because most of my friends are all these really amazing, talented, multidisciplinary creatives. And I just saw that we were all struggling to kind of get work or find jobs in those spaces. And if we did, like I think at that time when I started Joop Joop, I was 40, and it's just like, do you want to hire a 40-year-old, production assistant? Probably not. I can do it, but I also need to get paid more than $13 an hour, you know? So I was like this, like, I don't want to call myself middle-aged because I don't think that's true, but like, you know, older, 20 years older than everyone else that's kind of like entering those spaces. And it was just really, really challenging. But seeing that I had a huge community of people that were struggling with the same thing that I was like, I think that there is space for me to take up here. And this is like, from that theme of invisible, this is where then all of a sudden I was like, oh, like I can be seen, I can be heard, but I just had to make that space and create that opportunity for myself because nobody was going to give it to me. So that's how Juke Troop got started. And I call it a radical creative agency because, you know, being an activist since I was 17, I just realized that there is so many things in most spaces, and not just like creative industries that are problematic. Like in the film industry, obviously people are struggling in Me Too movement, and there's so many things that need to be better. But you know, the same struggles that I experienced in the kitchen. You know, it was just like, I don't know, I don't think that we're doing this the right way, guys. You know, and so even though I didn't had never officially worked in those creative spaces, I kind of instinctually knew how I would want to run a thing, you know. So I started including pronouns on my call sheets when I first started, and people were just like, oh, that's cool, that's interesting, you know. And so people weren't even doing that even just 3 years ago, you know.
Wow.
So there was you know, and being able to do the extra work. And if I had a client that said, hey, you know, I'm looking for you know, some Black models for this photo shoot, and I would just say, okay, well, that's fine, I can probably find you some of those folks, but you know, do you know that maybe it's a great idea to look for a Black hair and makeup person as well, to be able to support that person and make them feel safe in that space. You'll get the best photos because they'll feel comfortable, and you know, bubble, and just kind of like going the extra mile to be able to make sure that the environments felt safe, and that the people that were involved in the project, in front of the camera and behind the camera, um, are all on the same page, you know. And so that has helped, and I can tell that the environments on the projects that I work on or on the sets that I'm producing feel different. And I'm really blessed because I haven't exactly even really been given an opportunity at this point to be on like a regular set, like a big film set, or you know, which is something that I would like to do. But I know that those environments, all you know, are not always going to be what I want to be in exactly. So it's nice to be able to decide what creative environment that is that I want to create, by being just really intentional with who I'm hiring for both sides of it. So
And you're such a badass. I have to say, like, I love so much how you took feeling invisible, feeling unrecognized by this space, and you were like, I'm not even just going to create a space for myself, but for everyone else who is treated the same way or feels the same way or isn't seen by this industry, which is so much more work than just like getting a production assistant job. It is so much more work, but the results I really shine through. And I'm curious, just your perspective on. I think we've seen some movement there the past 2 years. I do think in the creative space there have been several like public calls for more diverse hiring and more equity in the industry. And I think we see some change, some. And I'm just curious your thoughts, having like created this whole space yourself, on like how much you see being done, and how much maybe is just surface level change.
yeah, this is a really great question, and I can talk about this stuff for like hours. I won't. But you know, it's been really interesting because basically, you know, I started Juke Juke January 2019. You know, was putting pronouns on the call sheets, whatever. You know, fast forward a year and a half, summer of 2020, like the Portland Revolution is happening, and Juke Juke could be the farthest thing on my mind. At the time, I was doing a lot of mutual aid support, and I just was like, wow, and the creative space in that moment felt very shallow and very like, I don't even know what am I doing? Like what is happening? So I kind of put Joop Joop on the back burner actually that whole summer, and was, out every night, doing all the things. And um I'll say that I was getting a lot of emails at that time. All of a sudden, the people that would never hire me before, now, after this very tragic thing, I mean, that's, happened already, happened so many times,
Mhm.
that than we care to count. But, it was like, oh, all of a sudden now everyone's trying to do better. And it was like, okay, well, that's fine, but like, what are your intentions? What's happening here? And so I, you know, now it's kind of like I see people are trying, and I see, especially like in Portland, because it is a majority of white folks that live here, and those folks that are in the positions of power for hiring or mentorship or supporting or whatever. It's like a weird thing, because one, it's kind of like, I've been tokenized, in so many spaces, and that's really hard. And I can tell when it's happening, and you're just kind of like, okay, well, do I play this game, or do I just do my own, and that's why I also started Juke Juke, was because I just was like, I just want to do my job. I don't want to think about being the only person of color on a set. Like that sucks. And I don't, it's just like, oh, this is like, it's just so hard. And you're just kind of always anticipating that, someone's going to say something to you that's kind of weird or whatever. And so a lot of that is very, very draining. But I think uh, with uh, with everything that happened, people are trying. But what I see now, what's a little bit complicated, is that people are like, okay, cool. Like, I really want to hire a woman of color to direct this commercial. And then, the ask will be, well, we think it would be really cool if the whole crew could be all women. And then you're like, okay, whoa, well, that's would be cool, but that's also really hard, right? When you think about like how much experience it takes for someone to learn how to be a camera person, how long it takes for someone to learn how to be a lighting person, right? And like, can we find women to do those jobs? Of course, we can find the women to do those jobs. But what happens is, because everyone's wanting to do better, sometimes there's these like really goofy parameters put on projects that really actually limit that person, that director, or that producer to do the best job they can do, because they're not able to hire the people that they actually know are the best for the job.
Mhm.
Um, and it almost like sets that person up for failure, And so um, I don't know, it's really complicated. And I know that everybody kind of has to start somewhere, but I feel like what really makes a lot of sense moving forward is just trying to be really thoughtful about, hiring more diversely, and understanding that, like, there also have that environment has to also feel like a safe space. And how does that happen? Well, that person that runs that company or owns that company should be implementing DEI training, for example, or making sure that your board reflects the community at large. So those are all small things that can happen, but really, yeah, it's a very, very layered and complicated thing. I'm happy to talk to anybody about it, or but it's really
Well,
hard. And now, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I do think you're a wonderful resource. You obviously have tons of very specific experience here, both as an individual and as a working professional in this space. So I do think if anyone wants to talk to you about it, I think they should reach out. But I also want to encourage them to like reach out to consult with you. Like this is not free labor. So like
Yeah.
you're really wonderful at this, and I think you're a great resource. But if folks reach out, I want them to know they should compensate you for your time. No free brain picking, okay? We're over that as creatives. Your time is not free. Your experience is not free. All the lessons you've coalesced into this wonderful advice is not free. Um,
Yeah. I appreciate that.
I'm saying that on your behalf, and I will
I
congratulate
appreciate that. And
anyone who
it's
says
like,
it's brain picking.
yeah, I also, I think over the last few years too, since I opened, or 3 years now since YouTube started, I kind of started being known as sort of like the BIPOC creative plug, so it's kind of like if you're looking for, black hair and makeup person, a woman stylist, Asian camera person, like, all those things, like I have a lot of those connections in those spaces. So,
I don't know, referral fees. Like you
I
have the
know.
connection, you have the network. Like, what's the harm in a referral fee? So,
I know people keep saying like you should turn into like a casting agency or something. Like it's so many things, right? That's the thing about YouTube as like a radical creative agency. I feel like sometimes like the focus of what it is, people are like, well, what do you do? And I'm like, I can do live events, I can do photo shoots, I can do commercials, I can do all these different things. Also casting, right? Like so many things. I can also refer crew to people. So it is a lot of things. And so yeah, hopefully, yeah, people will use me as a resource for sure.